Wrong song. No, now we have to listen to Sleep, man.
Oh,
yeah.
Or that Orthodox Christian pop punk.
Oh my God. Yeah,
that's
bad.
We won't do that.
It's bad. I think I was originally kind of softer on these guys. Because I was like, I like Sleep.
Mm.
And I think that maybe tainted my initial reading. Although I think I wasn't particularly nice to them the last time we talked about them either.
No.
But it just got weirder. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. What do you think of when you think of the term apocalypse? When like youth of the apocalypse?
Well, I had the misfortune to be early on acquainted with exactly what you mean, because in the 90s I had a book with that exact same title in Serbo-Croatian, which came out of that movement and was translated, I think published in Montenegro, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, I think of these people.
All right. Well, okay. These people. Welcome to The Empire Never Ended.
Yeah.
Back here again. It's me, Boris, sitting here with Ray, and
hey,
we got Sal Falcon on the ones and twos up here. We're still in Tetris mode. We really got to load some more stuff up on the old soundboard.
Well, it's still an Orthodox themed episode, so maybe Tetris is, somehow related to that.
No, but this is punk, man.
Yeah.
Come on. It's the last true rebellion. So why were we talking about Sleep and Youth of the Apocalypse? We're actually revisiting a subject that we already talked about 2 years ago, episode 213, when we talked about Death to the World.
But we had 2 episodes about them, right?
No, we had one.
Only one.
We had one specifically. Yeah, only one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. They've come up, I think,
mm-hmm.
maybe in other times. I mean, we've definitely talked about weird Orthodox churches and the like, of the non-canonical variety, ranging from, our famous O9A priest and the non-canonical Montenegrin Orthodox Church. We also talked about the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia.
Yeah.
Which we'll be mentioning again. So yeah, we're actually going back to the subject of Death to the World, which was an Orthodox Christian punk zine from California that came out in the 90s. And the reason that I actually wanted to go back to it is because there was recently a book published called Punks to Monks, the story of Death to the World zine.
Turns out it's not the full story.
It's not the full story. But, I picked it up because I was curious about filling in some of the gaps from my last, dive into them, which, it left some unanswered questions to me. And I was hoping this book would kind of answer them. And it didn't really. And it did not really make me feel great about them any more than I did before. But in the process of reading this book, it got me digging a little bit more, and I discovered some even more, disturbing, or let's say strange, very strange elements of the story that I didn't really know about before.
Like the peoples of Eurasia, the people that we cover on this podcast also converge through history and become very similar to each other in the worst possible way.
Yeah. So, before I reveal what these strange new revelations are, I think it would be good to maybe just kind of refresh ourselves on Death to the World. It has been 2 years. It'd be good to have a little refresher. No.
Yeah.
So, like I said before, it's a punk zine created by Justin Marler, who was one of the original members of the band, the doom sludge pioneering band called Sleep. He was on their first album when they were a 4-piece, and then after recording the first album, he was kind of fed up with the nihilism and self-destruction of the music scene in California, and he went off on a journey of self-discovery to become an Orthodox Christian monk, and then decided the best way to reach the youth of the lost punk youth, the lost youth of Generation X, was to use the aesthetics of the punk movement and like zines, DIY culture, in order to promote, his particular brand of Orthodox Christianity, which we'll get into here in a little bit. And it's, it always, the reason that I was kind of interested in this, they always seem kind of disingenuous.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a way of proselytizing. And, like I said in the beginning of the episode, I might have been a little bit soft towards them because I was like, okay, he was like, he lived in like a warehouse in the 90s, like was doing a bunch of drugs and like, I don't know, he said he would like cut himself listening to music and was like, on the verge of suicide and stuff like that. And then, discovered Orthodoxy. And somebody coming out of, drug and alcohol abuse, discovering religion is not a new thing. And it's not particularly something that I would be like, no, fuck you. You know what I mean? Yeah. Do spiritual journey, whatever you want to do. I mean, if that's good for you, whatever. In the last time we covered this, I kind of talked about some of the more problematic political dimensions that came out of his conversion to Orthodoxy, because it's not like, I don't know, he tried to seek out some sort of, progressive elements in the church or whatever. He kind of went straight into this like extremely conservative,
Russian anti-communist
right
thing.
Yeah. And so like, in the last episode, we talked a little bit about some of the like problematic people that he, wrote about in the zines, which is, largely like covering the lives of the saints and promoting his kind of spiritual guru, the late Seraphim Rose. And I'll talk about him in just a sec. But like, most famously, he tried to get a piece in, the famous zine Maximum Rock and Roll. And they were like, no. He's writing about, like his monastic brotherhood. And he said, he ran into like anti-Christian discrimination there. But, like in some of these articles or like in some of these issues of the zine, they talk a lot about the kind of, as they're called, new martyrs of Russia, right? So like Christians that were killed by the communists, which, again, whatever, that's part of their church history. Although like, in the process, they're big on Nikolai Velimirovich, publishing, you can remind us real quick.
We had an episode on him. He was a weirdo and a bishop in the Serbian Orthodox Church before the Second World War, and then after the Second World War, an anti-communist connected politically with the leader of the Serbian and Yugoslav fascism called Dimitrije Ljotić, spoke at his funeral. He died as a collaborationist, Ljotić did, during the Second World War. Nikolai Velimirovich also, before the war, was saying nice things about Adolf Hitler, who he called the Führer of the great German Reich, who's now going, following the way set out by Saint Sava in the Middle Ages in the Serbian medieval state, and got a medal, I think, from Hitler for whatever, being a cool dude. And then after the war, he stayed in the West, I guess in the United States, and in was it in the 90s or the year 2000s? He was, whatever the term is, canonized as a saint by the Serbian church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, this isn't the only case of, like, let's say, problematic people that the zine promoted too, right? So they talked about the persecution of this, Romanian fascist priest, George Calciu, who was like an Iron Guardist, like incredibly hardcore anti-Semite.
Yeah, Nikola Velimirovich was also a very hardcore anti-Semite.
Yeah. Holocaust denier, all that kind of fun stuff. And so, like, that's kind of the context in which we talked about them last time. So
they don't seem like, I guess, especially in their like English language propaganda, they don't necessarily always seem overtly political.
Right.
If you don't know what you're actually looking at and what are the references there. But yeah.
Yeah, and this is okay. Like, this was 1993 and he was publishing it, I think, up until like 96 or 7.
So he was a monk for a time, but then he stopped being a monk.
Right. And the question I asked myself, and I was mistaken in the last episode, in that I said that he left, and I got that from an interview of his, which was that he left the church due to some kind of problematic politics, and like he was tired of some of the politics and like infighting or whatever, and left, and we'll get into a little bit more of why that's not quite the way that he told it.
Well, I'm now, even like from what I heard from you, not really sure if he ever actually was an actual monk, right?
No.
Yeah.
Not, and that's something I didn't know.
Yeah.
I kind of took that for granted, right? Because I knew that his, so he was when he left the church, or when he left the scene and discovered Orthodoxy, it came largely through going to a bookstore in San Francisco, like an Orthodox bookstore, and talking to like a nun there who, and he got interested in it, and was told about a monastery that was relatively nearby that he then visited, and then became a monk. Now, this is St. Herman of Alaska Brotherhood in Platina, California. And this was a monastery that was founded by a rather interesting fellow by the name of Seraphim Rose and his buddy Herman Podmoshensky.
Herman was his
monastic name. His real first name was Gleb, I think.
Yeah, and Seraphim was.
Yeah, he was born Eugene Rose, so he's an American convert to Orthodoxy. It's an interesting guy because he had been a student of Alan Watts.
Yeah, was into René Guénon, and
very into René Guénon, and Guénon kind of shines through in his work a lot. But yeah, he had also studied like Eastern religions before converting to Orthodoxy. I think spoke Chinese maybe even, and was in that kind of world. He was a beatnik in the 50s, and then kind of renounced all that and became like a hardcore ascetic monk with his buddy.
He was also a gay man.
And
Herman was as well.
And Herman, I guess, was a pedophile.
Well, okay, you're now
we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Which, So I mean, they go ahead and they found this monastery, I think, in the 60s.
Yeah, which is now by some Orthodox people actually not considered a real monastery.
Well, it is a real monastery now. It wasn't a real monastery for a while. So this was when they founded it. They were in the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. We have an episode on that way early on. I think it's like episode 60 something. Rokor. Rokor, famously, like, it is the white emigre church. This kind of ties into us talking, about Eurasianism. So, they, after the Russian Revolution, kind of scattered all over the world, really all over the world from China, Manchuria, Japan, all over Europe, US, Canada, South America, really all over. And, they were in a major crisis because of losing their holy Russian Empire of orthodoxy, autocracy, and all that fun stuff. And in that crisis, they were obviously huge anti-communists. Not surprising, but more problematically, they were home to a lot of collaborators after the war in their ranks. Some pretty major guys who became bishops in the church were outright collaborators. And for example, in General Vlasov's army, was it the Russian Liberation Army? I always get the and famously, I think there's a monument to Vlasov in one of their monasteries in upstate New York. I think actually one of our listeners went to it, which is pretty wild. So yeah, I mean, it's that kind of obviously fucked up politics. But Seraphim Rose is pretty well regarded in some Orthodox circles. I mean,
considered a saint.
Not yet. He hasn't been canonized.
Yeah, but some. But
a lot of
there are icons of him represented as a saint.
Yeah, and his some of his more hardcore devotees do refer to him as
there are claims of Seraphim. Miracles. I think some monks and nuns speak of Seraphim Rose appearing to them, talking to them, and that kind of stuff. Also, as is often the case with, these kind of miraculous people, they say, his body didn't decay, all this stuff. And that's indication that, he was a saint. But his contribution, okay, I'm not getting into the theological aspects so much. I mean, he has this idea of the toll house of souls, which is kind of, I guess, controversial in some Orthodox circles in that it basically introduces the concept of purgatory, which doesn't otherwise exist. But again, that's kind of theological stuff. His main kind of magnum opus is this book, Nihilism, the Root of Revolution of the Modern Age, which we did talk about in the last episode, but we can talk a little bit more about it now, especially since we have since that episode talked about Guénon and a lot of, I think, Seraphim Rose's his kind of thesis on nihilism comes from this Guénonian rejection of modernity. I don't know. Do we need just a quick? Well, René
Guénon in a couple of sentences.
I mean, there are some parallels here because so René Guénon was originally a guy coming out of the occultist scene in France in the 20s and 30s into Rosicrucianism, mystical Freemasonry, all kind of Gnostic sects and things like that. But also studied, the religions of the world and so on, and became some kind of a self-proclaimed expert in that field. And then came to this realization that there is this eternal truth, the Sophia Perennis, the kind of eternal wisdom, which he identified as this kind of a primordial tradition, which is at the core of all of the legitimate religions that exist in the world, such as Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and I don't know. He had a list of what he thought was authentic and what wasn't. And I think at first he didn't like Buddhism and then later accepted it. But in order to somehow reach this eternal truth, you need to be more or less an orthodox adherent of a particular religion. You shouldn't have some kind of a syncretic religion and pick and choose whatever you want from this and that. You should be an orthodox believer of a particular religion.
By Orthodox believer, you mean like not Orthodox Christian. It can be of any religion, but yes.
And also like he introduced this concept, maybe he didn't introduce it, but he used it, that religions have their kind of exoteric and esoteric sides. Exoteric is the one that's, everyone can participate in and it's kind of obvious, and esoteric is the more mystical, hidden side that's something, practiced by these kind of mystical trends that exist in most of these religions, which are more in contact with this eternal primordial tradition, such as like Sufism in Islam and so on. He also was, he converted to Islam and became a Sufi, lived in Egypt, but he was more influenced actually by like Indian, Hinduistic influences as he understood them. And, was an extreme conservative and reactionary, and adopted this idea of the yugas and the cycle, like the cyclical vision of time and history, and this idea that the time is moving in this kind of de-evolutionary way from a golden age, then to a silver age, bronze, and then iron age at the end, or the dark age called Kali Yuga, which we currently live in for many thousands of years, which is defined as kind of the worst possible of these ages, because it's the age of complete like moral and spiritual decline and inversion of all traditional values into materialism and so on. So, and then really you're left with not being able to do much about that. Just that it's just the time that we live in. But what you should do is somehow preserve some spiritual knowledge that can be preserved by these kind of elitist mystical orders that you should get in touch with if they survive in some way. And he found that in Sufism, for example, and thought that this esoteric knowledge was lost in Christianity. And this is why he actually converted to Islam.
Right.
And that, after the end of this Kali Yuga, in some kind of apocalyptic event, a new golden age will start, when all of the like traditional values will be restored, and this kind of hierarchical view of society and so on. So he had a correspondent, a follower, Julius Evola, who was even more fascist than he was, and so on. But he was also very critical of modernity as such, and thought that this is basically this Kali Yuga. I mean, everything went to shit completely from his point of view. But also kind of was contradictory, because he advocated this kind of orthodox view of religion, and spoke against the New Age movements and syncretism, and thought of them as very extremely dangerous, called them like counter-initiatic, like that they were basically some kind of a form of Satanism or something like that. But himself actually was very syncretistic in his views, because he mixed up, the Hinduistic view of history with Sufism and so on.
Yeah.
So that's very contradictory. And also he himself had this very occult background, and never completely gave up on the idea of the possibility of existence of some kind of a traditionalist Freemasonry that would actually be like a true Christian kind of esoteric form. And some of his followers actually founded a lodge that follows some kind of a Guinonian path in France called the Great Triad, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot more than a couple sentences on Guinon, but thank you. Yes. No, that's great. I mean, yeah, obviously, I mean, Seraphim Rose, there's I think even video of him, audio of him talking about like Guinon and how much he likes him. Obviously, they part ways in certain places. Rose becomes an Orthodox Christian, and Guinon goes elsewhere. But within like kind of Rose's thesis on nihilism, it ultimately is that I think he kind of believes that we are in some sort of Kali Yuga, but he doesn't really call it that. He traces nihilism, what he calls nihilism, with like the advent of like modernity, as he sees it, right? Which then, is kind of the death of like spiritual truth in society, that's like leads to the death of like objective truth as represented by like religion, through these kind of revolutionary ideas. So like the one whole chapter is on like the nihilist dialectic, which she then goes through like liberalism, realism, vitalism. These are all these stages of the nihilist dialectic. The war against God. The French Revolution for him is obviously bad, but even like since he was like a beatnik, he critiques, like, for example, Dadaism and all that kind of stuff too. Obviously Marxism, everything else is part of this,
which is interesting because Evola was a Dadaist and then later also critiqued it, so maybe that was okay, he was a beatnik, a bohemian, so he probably had personal context with that.
For sure. Yes, and then of course materialism, secularism. That's all. It's all bad, and it all causes these revolutionary movements that are there, that are decaying moral fabric of society and like waging war on God. And so this is very much the context in which Justin Marlar comes in, like the kind of thought that's being promoted at this monastery. Of course, Seraphim Rose dies relatively young in 1982, but like his legacy is carried on then by the members of the St. Herman of Alaska Brotherhood and his perhaps lover, the abbot there, after his death, Herman Podmashensky.
But did anyone ever claim that they were lovers?
Yeah, I mean, people claim all kinds of things. I mean, there's a lot of speculation about this. First of all, because they were Podmashevsky was Orthodox. He wasn't a convert.
Were they friends before Seraphim Rose became an Orthodox Christian?
Supposedly, yes.
Okay,
and that they were kind of like inseparable friends. They started the monastery together.
Okay, because Seraphim Rose was an open gay man. It was not like he was a bohemian beatnik guy, I think.
Yeah.
And I think some of his followers today, like, they more choose to ignore that side than to like actively deny it or something like that. And I guess some even write how, he chose the righteous path of a Christian and a monk and gave up that life.
Right, became a celibate, won't give in to temptation and whatever. And but
it's not like a claim by his enemies that he denied.
No. I mean, I think that's a pretty well established fact. But there's a lot of when you start reading, because he does have a lot of very fanatical supporters, and guys who love him very much, and Justin Marlar is a good example of that. But then also a lot of people who don't like him, who think that
that it's a cult.
That it's a cult, basically. Yeah, which it kind of is in some ways. And so Marlar goes there. He's very surprised that he's well accepted by the monks there, because he has tattoos. He's like a guy from the punk and metal scene. In the 90s, when tattoos were still not common. And he was really surprised that he was accepted there. I think that some of the other monks, I think the guy who's the abbot now, Damascene Christensen, I think, he was also he was older than Justin Marlar, but he was kind of out of the hippie scene. Also a guy who explored like Taoism and Eastern religions and became an Orthodox monk. So it was kind of an accepting environment there. And, in this book, he talks a little bit about like what that looked like, how how they were, so really great to him and accepting, and that like, Father Herman was very concerned about the things that he was hearing about the youth and this epidemic of suicide and drug abuse. Mm-hmm. And like, how do we reach out to these kids? And that's where the kind of idea to make, where his idea, Justin Marlar's idea was to, okay, well, we can reach them through zines. I know that scene, right? Mm-hmm. I know the aesthetics, and what he realized going to the monastery is that this is, and it's their, kind of trademark phrase, the last true rebellion, mm-hmm. right? The last true rebellion isn't punk rock or metal or any of that kind of stuff. It's the rejection of like all worldly things, rejection of the modern world, and, Orthodox Christianity, basically, but in a very kind of radical ascetic tradition, right? Yeah. Become a monk, get rid of all of these things. Like, oh, you think you're against consumerism? Well, guess who's really against consumerism? It's, the monks that live without electricity and water and, like in islands. And
so it wasn't really, and you can tell it wasn't some kind of idea to create a kind of a Orthodox Christian punk scene, like
no, not at all.
Hard rocker punk scene, but it's like we're more really giving up on punk and accepting like a kind of a non-subcultural regular Orthodox Christianity, but maybe using some of the aesthetics of the subculture in order to attract some kids.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. It's not about what would kind of later become in this kind of more modern interpretation of like, like you'll have like an Orthodox punk scene. It's like, no, that kind of music is in and of itself kind of a projection of this nihilist modernity that we live in, right? Mm-hmm. And that it doesn't really have that it's kind of ultimately doesn't have any redemptive value, right? Like, and it should be rejected. And so like their whole thing was like, we need to get people out of this destructive world and into something, spiritually healthy. And I mean, I discover it's not a super spiritually healthy environment by most accounts. But I think maybe even before we talk about why that is, I'll just, there are some things that I did discover in this book that I didn't know about before. So like, to me, like I knew it was ultimately this. It wasn't, making a punk scene. It was getting you to become like a conservative in some ways. And they were very surprised Maximum Rock and Roll wouldn't take the ad, but that then they did get like positive responses from other people, right? Like people were writing in and they'd go to like shows, not even just punk shows. It says in the book here, they went to like the first time they went out to a show as monks was to like a Grateful Dead show and like talk to people on acid and like and like got people to got at least like one or two people to like go to the monastery like that. But then there's like some tidbits which again, it's not punk at all. Like for example, he said that James Dobson from Focus on the Family wrote to them and was like, "This is amazing. People are leaving the church and, you're getting them in. What's your trick?" And asked them to do like a radio spot, Focus on the Family. And James Dobson, this is that kind of really kind of horrible American televangelist lunacy. And they did like radio spots for them. So good on Maximum Rock and Roll. You know what I mean? Like this shit should have been marginalized and pushed very far away from the scene. And so, I mean, that's just kind of ridiculous shit. Right. But it's also kind of, I realize more and more that it is kind of an AstroTurf project from the beginning too. Right. It's not like a DIY. It wasn't him just doing this, right? It was the monastery paying for him to go to Kinko's and to get all the material, put it together, ship it out, all this kind of stuff. This isn't like, him by himself doing it. Of course, they took donations and stuff like that, but it would have been a lot harder to get that stuff out there without the support of the church. And so, Death to the World had to him a very kind of surprisingly positive response. He kind of goes deeper and deeper into this world of monasticism, which again, not in and of itself a terrible thing. You can do whatever he wants. He goes off to a different monastery, which is in some ways not even, well, it's not, neither of these are monasteries. Still haven't revealed that why yet, but he goes to live like an extremely ascetic life on Spruce Island in Alaska, where there's, barely there's no infrastructure. It's him and a few other monks out there, like no water, electricity. And this is where he writes his kind of take on Seraphim. He kind of develops on Seraphim Rose's thesis of nihilism and writes a book called Youth of the Apocalypse, which we mentioned, which I guess you read a long time ago.
I didn't read that book. I read a different book that used that title. I think was inspired by Death to the World and that whole scene. Yeah.
Which it's not really a scene. That's the interesting thing. But I know. I mean, I always kind of thought it was. And, okay, Marler himself said, like, I'm not a writer, like, it's not a well-written thing. And, it's not. Okay, whatever. It's basically just an angsty tirade against the apocalyptic culture facing Generation X, right? So, like, and it's written in this, like, in that kind of language too, right? So the breaking down of our world is due to one philosophy, one mission that has been victorious over man's freedom of thought since time began. Nihilism. It is a belief that there is no truth. It is like a heartless and gutless machine that presses on, giving birth to destruction, sorrow, pain, and death. It chooses the young for its victims, for it is easy to scar the innocence of youth. It is this machine that controls the spirit of the times and tells us that there is no answer to the question, why, and therefore no reason to live at all. It is this machine of apostasy that has given birth to the youth of today. We are her children. We are the children of nihilism. We are the youth of the apocalypse. Now we are left with a generation that is dying off due to suicide, the last genocide. This genocide can only be stopped by truth. In order to embrace this truth, we must die to this world and be resurrected. This is the unshackling. This is the last true rebellion. And you can see how that would have some appeal, right?
Yeah.
I talked about that in the last episode that we did on them too. Like, there's a lot of sexism in there too.
Sure.
Like modernity has turned women into harlots and all this kind of stuff, and that's all whatever. And knowing what I now know about the cult that he went into, I feel like he got there and they kind of really intensified that whole apocalyptic feelings for him in a way that may not have been great. I don't know.
I mean, cults do that.
Yeah. And there are a couple things that, like, now when he reflects on, like, this kind of apocalyptic upbringing, it's that, like, the school system is so, like, corrupted by modernity that, like, he says, like, they had to read dark literature, like, Catcher in the Rye, To Kill a Mockingbird, 1984. And that this kind of, like, as a youth kind of sent him further and further into this spiral of like the horrors of modernity. And, like, the only way to get out of that is to leave this world. So what I did touch on in that last episode is that he left, right, at a certain point in the later 90s.
Well, he didn't leave Orthodoxy.
No, he left. Yeah. He stopped being a monk and became a lay person. And he does have, like, I didn't know before, a kind of tragic history after that. Like, he gets married and has a kid, his wife dies, and he remarries, like, she dies, I think some terrible illness, then remarries another woman who commits suicide, and then remarries again. And I mean, it's kind of it's a fucked up life. But in that episode, when I said that he had left the church because, or left the monastic community, because of certain political issues in the monastery, I said that his that the abbot of the monastery, Father Herman Podmoshenski, was defrocked while he was in the church, while he was in the monastery, and that is incorrect. So I'm correcting that. But admittedly,
Well, who was in the monastery?
While Justin Marler was in the monastery, that's kind of how I had read it, because they were very vague. When you read about this, it was pretty vague. And
so Herman, who used to be best friends with the late Seraphim Rose and founded the monastery, was defrocked by the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia for sexual improprieties, which I had thought maybe had to do with him being gay, and then some allegations that had surfaced from like young monks who said that he sexually assaulted them. I didn't realize, digging a little bit deeper, that he was probably a pedophile. Yeah.
It was most likely that some of these boys were underage.
Yeah.
So that's pretty fucked up. I mean, it's very fucked up. And that he was not defrocked in the 90s, but well before that, in the 1980s.
Yeah.
And
so he defrocked, meaning that he stopped being a priest, but he remained a monk.
He stopped being a priest, but remained a monk.
Which meant, so that means that he can do liturgy and such things, but he's still...
Yeah, but he can't be abbot of the monastery anymore either. So the monastery then effectively is leaderless.
Unless they had someone else there who...
But they didn't.
Okay.
And so in order to solve this problem of being... And look, getting defrocked is a big deal, obviously. And, It takes a lot for that to happen in a lot of churches. Rocourt, didn't defrock people for being, like anti-Semites and Nazis, but this was a step too far. And I guess it had been well established enough, this like pattern of assault, that like they finally did it. But in order to solve the problem of not being a priest anymore, not being able to run essentially the monastery that he co-founded, he found his way around that. And this is also something I mentioned before, but it's very disturbing. So as is often the case in these kinds of situations, these guys don't want to stop being priests. They want to keep doing what they're doing, and they'll kind of seek out anybody who can reordain them. And that is not likely to happen in any of the established churches, because you got defrocked for pedophilia.
Because he wasn't only the abbot of the monastery, he was also basically the best friends of the guy they consider a saint and treat as a guru, and co-founded the monastery with him.
Right.
So he's a pretty important, kind of a central person there.
Yeah. An important guy. Yeah. And this was like a big shock to people. And so he sought out and found another defrocked pedophile priest who was kicked out of the Greek Orthodox Church, a guy by the name of Pangratios Vrionis, who in, I think, even the 60s had been kicked out of the Greek church. And I think actually even went to prison for, like raping a boy. But then started his own church, and appointed himself bishop, as these things go, in the kind of old calendarist tradition, which are hardcore sect in Orthodoxy that thinks everything went to hell with the adoption of the new calendar in Greece that isn't the what's it called, the Julian calendar.
Especially because the new one is named after a pope. I think that's a big problem.
Yes, it's the Papist one.
Gregorian.
Yes, and so this guy, Vrionis, had his own church in Queens, New York, and had, support from some other like kind of unrecognized non-canonical churches. And, Herman Podmoshenski goes to him. This guy is like, okay, we're both pedophiles. You can become a priest again. Here, I ordain you. But that's, of course, something that no legitimate church is gonna recognize. Now, it's not clear to me, and I'm not really sure how these things work. I don't know why Rokor just didn't take the monastery away from him. I don't know what kind of methods of coercion they can use to make that happen, but I guess they didn't, right? So he was able to continue running his monastery as an unrecognized monastery by any church. So they were kind of, I think it's described in some article as being in a spiritual no man's land from 1986 to the year 2000.
A freelance monastery.
At which point, like, he dies in 2000, and then the monastery is readmitted to the world of legitimate churches, is taken under the Serbian Orthodox Church, and the former hippie monk, is now the abbot there. So,
but I think Herman was still alive. They became a part of the Serbian Church, I think. Because I know
it became a part of the church in 2000. Yeah, that's when he died.
But maybe it was just a matter of months or weeks.
Yeah, maybe.
Because I read that like when he died, the Serbian bishop didn't allow him to be buried on the grounds of the monastery. So I think they were already a part of the Serbian church.
Which is a pretty big diss, you know what I mean? Since he founded it.
Yeah.
Founded it. I mean, I guess props to them for...
Yeah.
I mean, they let him become a monk in the Serbian Orthodox Church before his death too.
Yeah.
But not a priest, right?
Yeah.
So it all gets kind of weird.
But I think he was like... I think that like... Because monk and priest is like... they're like separate sacraments. It's like a thing that's it's not like a bureaucratic thing for them. It's like they do their magic and then you're a priest or a monk.
Right.
And even if you're like a bad pedophile person, if you're a priest, you're a priest. Like the Holy Spirit works through you. Unless they do their thing and you stop being a priest. But they I think never took the monk thing from him. So even when they were freelance, they still, even the people who don't like him, they refer to him like, they just say you shouldn't ever refer to him as Father Herman, whatever, because he stopped being a priest, but he was a monk still. So even he was a weird guy who was basically a freelance guy, not directly. Maybe actually, even if you're a sinner and a heretic, but if you're a Christian in a specific church, you always in their eyes remain a member of the church. So he probably was, a legitimate Orthodox guy for them and a monk.
Right.
Even though, he was a criminal and whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are things that I didn't know about. And I was curious, like, that's why I said, that's why I bought the book. Cause I wanted to see if he ever, cause I knew that, Herman had been kicked out. I knew all that stuff, but I didn't know when it happened. I didn't realize that happened so much before. And that when Justin Marlar became a monk, it was in a monastery that wasn't recognized by anybody. In fact, considered like a heretical church, like a heretical monastery. They were in schism with like the legitimate churches. I didn't know that at all. And so, and then even learning about that, I was curious to see how they talk about Father Herman, right? Because, obviously he left monkhood because of problematic politics, right? And there's really none of that.
Priesthood,
no, Marlar.
He did. Okay,
yeah. And there's nothing but praise for this guy, which is kind of shocking in some ways, because I mean, this wasn't like the details of what got him defrocked are still, I think, not officially talked about by Rokor, but people know, and people, whatever, the story's out there. And there's none of that, it's all praise. Like, he was a great guy. He helped him out so much. And a lot of this book is in the form, it's actually basically a collection of interviews and then like some republished material. So like, this is how he like talks about him. Like, sometime that year, Father Herman read an article about young people that disturbed him. He came to me and said, "This is the widespread depression and teen suicide are on the rise, and that younger generation is in despair. You're young. What's going on?" Now, Father Herman was an older man of cultured Russian parentage who had spent his earliest years in Riga, Latvia. His worldview as a child was of Orthodox pre-revolutionary Russia. Later, he was inspired by the idea of Holy Russia, having been transported to Alaska by 18th and 19th century Russian missionaries, and that inspiration was strengthened by the old Russians who taught him at Holy Trinity Seminary at Jordanville, New York. And now the guy who's doing the interview says, yes, he had a tragic youth. Although his family had moved to Riga when he was a child, his father was arrested by the Soviet communists for being a descendant of a pre-revolutionary industrialist family. They never saw him again. He died in a Soviet gulag. There was a short reprieve for his mother during World War II when German troops occupied Latvia.
Yeah.
Okay. But when the Soviets retook the city, she was forced to retreat with the Germans to save herself and her children. They lived for years in a German displaced persons camp before moving to New York. Blah. So again, very you know, and then to that, Justin says, yes, but that was a tragedy on a scale that hardly any American of my generation had experienced. It was a different world.
Well, thankfully there was that short period of Nazi occupation when you could relax a little bit.
Right. So, I mean,
an otherwise tragic life.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's nothing there that indicates that there was any kind of problem with, and in fact, they call him Father Herman.
Yeah.
Even though he had been defrocked.
Yeah.
Even though the priest that had reordained him as a priest, was another unrecognized criminal pedophile priest.
I think there is some theory among some of these people that you can never really defrock someone once you make someone a priest.
Well, isn't that nice?
Yeah, so it's probably some defrocked people who have that theory. Yeah.
And yeah, like not only does he not then, mention why he left, he just says that he, he became a layperson, all that other stuff. So that really got me thinking. I was like, man, like that's pretty crazy. I've run into a lot of these unrecognized churches before. Like I said, we've talked about some of them. It gets kind of crazy and it's confusing. We talked a lot about like the weird tradcath sects and all the kind of crazy stuff that goes on there. I was like, well, this guy had been defrocked so much earlier. Like that's a pretty controversial thing that he did, being reordained by this other freak. Like, how did he have this? How did they have that other place in Alaska? How did they seemingly have good relationship with this Orthodox bookstore in San Francisco and have people that they could recommend? Like there's an infrastructure around this that seemed kind of larger. And that's why I just thought he had been in ROCOR, right? And this is where the story gets really, really weird. And again, this is nothing from the book. The book just kind of set me on this path.
Yeah.
And now here we are. And it's especially funny to me. Well, okay. We'll talk about why it's especially funny. So yeah, this is where the story gets unexpectedly weird.
Yeah. I mean, this was also very weird.
Again, this is kind of like in your face, death to the world. Like I knew there was something fucking very weird about them.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, in their eyes, this probably even compromises more than they were like. One of their spiritual leaders was a pedophile.
Yeah. And this connection isn't as far off as you might think. So again, Herman Podmoshensky gets reordained and he needs to have a network, a flock of people.
By the Greek pedophile priest.
So enter a weird cult called the Holy Order of Mans. Whom? And we'll get to how this connects to death to the world and to the church in a second. So this is a cult that emerged in California in the 1960s. Great time to have a cult. I mean, the 60s in general, but especially where they started out, which is like down in like Haight-Ashbury and that whole deal. Led by a fellow named Earl Blyton, who was born in 1904, who was, I guess, to his devotees, a human reincarnation of the Apostle Paul. but also had, I guess, lived for 200 years, spoke directly to Jesus.
They call him Father Paul, I think.
Or Brother Paul, or, whatever. Earl was none of those things. In fact, I guess he had some run-ins with the law back in the day for, I think, practicing medicine without a license. And, some other fun stuff like skipping out on like child support or something.
Yeah.
all those kind of fun things. Got his theological degree from some mail order diploma mill that was run by some other ex-con who I think he even later got arrested for some other shit. So real cool stuff. It's a strange mixture of, I guess, theosophy, tantric practices, Gnosticism.
They were like a Christian mystical New Agey cult.
Yeah, they're a Christian mystical New Agey cult. So in the early days, they also kind of took on this Catholic form.
Yeah,
I think they dressed like Catholic priests and monks.
Neo-Gnostic movements in the U.S. and maybe in Europe as well, but I know for sure for the U.S. have some kind of a theosophical connection and tend to call themselves Catholics. So
yeah, I mean, this is that. And what's the you said it earlier, the one with the R, the
Rosicrucians.
Yes, Rosicrucians.
Yeah.
Also elements of that. They did things like ordain women as priests. It kind of exists in like a they lived in kind of communes. Going in part with like the kind of Catholic teachings, it was a lot of charity, like St. Francis of Assisi. They ran like outreach programs in like the Tenderloin in San Francisco, and like lots of kind of like serving food and charity and all that kind of stuff. But they're like basically this neo-Gnostic weird 1960s New Age cult. The MANS is an acronym. If you were wondering what does the Holy Order of MANS mean, it's an acronym meaning Mysterion, Agape, Nous, Sophia. So Greek words: Mysterion, divine mystery; Agape, divine love; Nous, divine mind; and Sophia, wisdom. And this is, like I said, they start off in like San Francisco in the 60s. They kind of rapidly gain followers, and it starts really developing into a nationwide cult movement. It's
kind of hippies, right?
Yeah. Very much like in that like hippie world. So, by the 70s, they have several thousand, they say maybe even up to 6,000 followers all across the US, I think also in Canada and even in Europe. They own tons of property. This is like a thing with cults and just any kind of religious movements in the US. They usually become very wealthy through property, because they can get tax exempt status, and they're in this communal form of organization. So everybody's kind of giving all their worldly possessions to the movement, to the church, and they're buying up property. So they run lots of coffee shops, bookstores all around the country, and they even have a chain of restaurants, a quite profitable chain of restaurants called Brother Juniper's. And I looked it up. There's one left in Memphis, Tennessee, and it's still keeping, I think, with those teachings. I mean, here, I guess, Sal, you can play the little clip from local news from like a year ago in Memphis about like, their free Christmas dinners.
On this Christmas Day, a Memphis restaurant is spreading holiday cheer to those in need. Brother Juniper's hosted his free annual Christmas feast, drawing a huge crowd. WREG's Alan Self was there and has this heartwarming story.
Brother Juniper's, a popular breakfast spot in the university area, opened its doors for those in need. From 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., people lined up to enjoy a free Christmas feast. The restaurant's owner, Jonathan Copeland, says this is their way of giving back to the city of Memphis on Christmas Day.
Our Father, who art in heaven.
The best feeling is seeing everyone together at a special time, a feast day of our Lord's incarnation.
So, this is a big movement, probably like, a pretty solid for one of these New Age mystical movements of that era. Like, they're doing pretty well for themselves. Blyton, however, dies in 1974 in a motel.
And does not resurrect.
He does not resurrect. They did not report his body as dead for 3 days. They were hoping he would rise from the dead. I think he did. I think the thing is that he died, I think, on Good Friday, and they were hoping that he would, do the whole resurrection Jesus thing.
Yeah. It would be a bummer if he resurrected and they just buried him. It would be kind of unfortunate.
Let me out of this fucking thing.
All right.
But I mean, okay, that's like they had belief in him, I guess, enough to wait a couple days just in case. That obviously didn't happen. And, then there's what typically happens in these kinds of cults. Partially a crisis of leadership, right? There's a few different people who are kind of vying for the head position. And then there's, a little something that, you might have heard about called Jonestown in 1978, which draws a lot of public attention to cults. They end up, I think, on like a list of cult organizations in the US, which obviously isn't a super good look for them. So the Holy Order of Man's,
they had a new leader, right?
Yeah, they have a new leader. This guy I can't remember his first name. His last name's Rossi. Decide that they need to kind of get out of this, potential problems with the cult label and seek some sort of legitimacy, right? And eventually,
is there a pedophile priest somewhere that can make us more legitimate?
Exactly. They decide that they should mass convert to Eastern Orthodoxy. Now, okay, great. But I guess who's going to take you? Now, how exactly they met?
I think they could do better than this.
I don't know. I mean, it worked. It ultimately kind of worked out okay.
I think so. At the end, allegedly they had like 750 people.
Well, okay, so
I think they went to a more legitimate church, they would take them.
Maybe. I think that like a lot of the legitimate churches were kind of scared by them.
Okay.
Because it is like some sort of New Age mystic cult. You have to basically, I don't know if there's some sort of. Of course, I think anybody can convert. They want.
Yeah.
But I think they were kind of treated with suspicion. I think also this wasn't a genuine necessarily turn to faith. They wanted to rebrand basically.
And they wanted to remain probably a group as a whole.
Yes. Yeah. And so who do they find to do that? But, another San Francisco or California based group, the Father Herman from St. Herman of Alaska's Brotherhood in Monastery in California.
Do you think it's possible that there was some earlier connection between the groups?
I was wondering about that. I was trying to see if there was, because it would make sense in some ways, right? I mean, Seraphim Rose and Gleb / Herman were running around San Francisco. He was a beatnik in the 1950s.
New Agey
beatnik guy. I'm not sure when Earl Blyton lived in Cal, because I think he moved around a lot. Because, he had some trouble with the law in certain places or whatever. It was easier to do back in the day to just move to different states over. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they had some sort of previous connection, or at least had known about Seraphim Rose. Maybe also because Seraphim Rose the monastery did operate a bookshop in San Francisco for a while. And I don't think it's the one that Justin Marler discovered Orthodoxy yet. It's that in a second. But these guys were also very prominent on the streets in San Francisco. So I'm guessing that there was at least maybe some members of leadership knew about this monastery or whatever. Whoever decided to convert to Orthodoxy probably was like, okay, that guy, those guys, at least like they were in the beat scene. They know all this stuff. They're probably going to be cool with us.
And the new abbot being a hippie, do you think has a hippie origin? Maybe there's some.
Yeah, probably. I wouldn't be surprised. Cause like, from what I understand, like, okay, they ran a chain of restaurants around the country, but like their presence in San Francisco was like pretty well regarded. Like they had this, I forget what it was called. It still exists, but it's no longer under the Holy Order of Mans or its successor. This house that's like I don't know, some sort of charity project that's still a nonprofit of some kind.
So when Justin went to the monastery and he was surprised how he was well received, even though he was this subcultural looking guy with tattoos, they already had experience with subcultural people at that point.
Yes, they had not just like the one hippie guy at the monastery. No, they had
750 new age
750 people were mass converted by Father Herman in one day.
Yeah.
And this is in 1988. So again, after he had been defrocked and reordained by this pedophile priest. So they join a non-canonical church. They all become Orthodox Christians and they rename themselves to Christ the Savior Brotherhood or Christ the Savior Brotherhood.
So are they now led by Herman?
No. So this is where I'm not quite sure what the specific arrangement was. But again, these guys had a lot of money and property and big networks. So they all mass convert to Orthodoxy. So like I said, they had 6,000 members before Blyton died or when Blyton died. And the numbers were kind of dwindling. And then some, when they decided to mass convert to Orthodoxy, some didn't want to do that. They didn't want to be Orthodox or even pretend to be Orthodox because, for example, they had women priests and that's not something you can do in the Orthodox Church. And so like, I think people split off from there. And it actually, despite them mass converting, there is today a Holy Order of Mans functioning, operating now. Like they even have stuff on YouTube.
Yeah, some people restarted the group under the original name, I guess.
Right.
But also have some Orthodox stuff, right?
Yeah, I think so. But I think they just incorporated it. Well, because like, okay, so the way that it went is that like, so they come up with this kind of specific arrangement, right? They all mass convert and he doesn't really question them. But, they get something out of it, right? Like, the monastery and Father Herman get something out of it because again, they have this massive network of like profitable businesses. They own property. They give him they give Father Herman one of their retreats, in some other like census designated place in California, which eventually I think becomes the mailing address for Death to the World when it starts.
So the address of the Death to the World is property owned by this cult.
Yes. And I think the bookstore that he discovered Orthodoxy at is owned by this cult too.
A New Age bookstore. Yeah.
Well, it became an Orthodox bookstore, but before that it was a New Age bookstore. And again, these are things that you will not find in Punks to Monks, the story of the Death to the World zine. But if you look up the name of, for example, that bookstore that he went to, it shows up on a list, right? So, they then become, and again, this gets kind of confusing, right? As it does with all of these weird religious organizations, because there's a million different acronyms, a million different orders, a million of this, that, and the other thing. So my understanding is that this entire network of the Holy Order of Mans, I love saying the whole thing. I could just say whom, but I like saying Mans. So it's funny to me. For some reason, turns into this Valam Society of America, named after a famous monastery in Russia, Valam Monastery. And so by like the 90s, they have still like bookstores all over the country, and cafes, coffee shops all over the country. And they're like, I think the guy Rossi eventually kind of cashes out, literally. Like he mass converts them, and then he gets like a severance, and it's like, guys, I'm out. Like, you know, they gave him like $250,000, and you know, which I guess in the 80s was probably is more money, and like, you know, he went out, and they operated within this network. So this Father Herman has then pretty good luck, right? Like he was at risk of losing his monastery. Getting reordained by a non-canonical church doesn't usually do great things for you, but he discovered a cult that he could then convert and also cash in on. And that worked out great for him.
Yeah.
And then because, you know, he had this good relationship with, I guess, you know, counterculture and the occultist groups and stuff like that, it was a welcoming environment for a young punk rocker to become a monk.
And I guess he had something to offer to the Serbian church at the end when they allowed him to be a part of that and become legitimate Orthodox people again. And I wonder if some of these people from the cult are now in the Serbian church. Probably are. Huh?
Well, they're spread out. I was doing a lot of like reading around different like Orthodox subreddits and stuff like that. There's a lot of people. I mean, okay, mass converting like that, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, that's 700 some people to convert in one day is a lot. And they were treated with a lot of suspicion. But I think over time, some of them were admitted into legitimate churches, or like, you know, went to study at different like theological seminaries of some of the more legitimate churches, and have entered. And so there are people that will say that like, oh yeah, my local Orthodox Church of America branch has like a bunch of man's people in it, people. Or for example, like I'm not exactly sure how that worked out now. Yeah, there must have been a deal, because some of these bookstores that were formerly, you know, man's ones that then became Valam Society Orthodox bookstores are now controlled by different legitimate Orthodox churches. So they kind of split up that property. But like at the time, so the complicated politics that Marler left out was because, like, you know, he wasn't part of a real canonical church, and the real canonical churches didn't like these people. So when he was writing Youth of the Apocalypse on that island in Alaska, they were kind of shunned by members of real churches. So here's an article from a local newspaper, Anchorage Daily News, from the 90s, where, you know, they describe the man's conversion to Orthodox Christianity and this whole thing with Podmashevsky, that basically, like the Valam Society of America is a joint venture of the Reformed Mons and Podmashensky's group. It helps support 50 or so bookstores and coffee shops around the world, like Catacomb Bookstore in Lincoln, Nebraska, Desert Wisdom Coffee House of Kansas City, Missouri, which still exists and is now to this day connected with the Death to the World scene, the resurrected Death to the World, which is crazy. So this is not a connection that just went away. It's these people built the infrastructure that created Death to the World, which is fantastic. So yeah, they called them Herman's Hermits. So it says, like, in some Orthodox circles, the young monks of Spruce Island are mocked as Herman's Hermits. Their garments have been called costumes. In many cases, they have little formal religious training. Where have we heard this before?
Yeah.
Another uncanonical church that made a fucking Satanist a priest. Despite monks' willingness to live an austere life, critics have questioned the depth and sincerity of their beliefs. The same questions haunt Mans. Now, it is not a healthy Orthodox environment, said the Reverend Victor Sokolov of the Holy Trinity Cathedral in San Francisco. He called Podmashevsky's following a cult devoted not to the church, but to Podmashevsky, a self-serving leader with excessive personal control over the lives of converts. He tries his best to isolate the brotherhood from main orthodoxy, Sokolov said. It's absolutely an unorthodox thing. He is confusing people, misguiding people.
Wow.
So, yeah. That's unexpected. So not only, not only let's recap here. So not only does Death to the World come from an unordained pedophile sub church
Kicked out of Rokor.
The entire network is, and like Justin Marlar's spiritual growth is facilitated by a weird hippie, like neo-Gnostic, like theosophist cult called the Holy Order of Mans, who then turned this like Valam society, whatever the fuck. And
I mean, some of them became like legitimate members of like legitimate Orthodox churches around 2000, probably. Right.
Yes. Yeah. And in this article even actually quotes Marlar. It says, on the Alaska level, monk Justin Marlar and his brethren dismissed criticism of Podmashevsky. Maintaining his schism with the mainstream church in 1989 was political, nothing more.
Okay.
The Orthodox Church is a maze of jurisdictions with a history of splintered factions, Marlar said. I mean, yes, that's true, but there are like, again, canonical churches which do terrible things. Yes, we know they're also horrible organizations for the most part, but there's the uncanonical churches of people that were, say, kicked out for pedophilia, and that doesn't really, I think, go into the whole maze of jurisdictions. It seems
what was the political reason for him being kicked out?
Right.
Yeah.
What was it?
Yeah.
Please tell me. Because it's not like Marlar is, let's say, a defender of LGBTQ rights. He doesn't let's say he didn't believe the pedophilia allegations and was like, they kicked him out for being gay. That's not cool. Gay's okay. I'm that kind of Orthodox monk, and I don't think that's a bad thing. No, these people are homophobes.
Yeah.
To this day. I mean, like, okay, if we're going back to the Punks to Monks book.
And what if it was a political reason? If whatever reason they defrocked him, and who are you to question them if you're an Orthodox guy? Like, that's the church.
Yeah.
Like, so what if it's political? They know what they're doing.
Yeah, there's a hierarchy in these things, and you're supposed to follow it. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
This isn't a choose your own adventure church. It doesn't work that way. God damn it. And this is me telling it to them, and I can feel smug about it because these guys are assholes about they're like really moralizing and so they're talking shit. His whole thing is leave the subcultures because those are unhealthy communities that are like spiraling us to the apocalypse. And he goes and joins a literal cult. That's pretending to be a legitimate Christian group. And then to this day is covering up that connection. He's not.
And he's covering up that his guru was a pedophile.
Yes. Yeah, and saying, he's a great guy.
Yeah,
a great guy. They really helped me out a lot and whatever.
Yeah.
So I mean, fuck these people.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about it. And things haven't changed that much, and just reading this book helps me go through that. Before I'd even discovered the man's connection, again, I was being a little soft on him. And then I get to a part where he's just and this is in an interview in 2024, is feminism has destroyed men. Men. First, we have a generation of young men who have been emasculated. Over the past half century, a feminist mentality has derided men, maleness, masculinity. The entire narrative of men has been dismantled. And if you're white and male, it's really over. So, poor white males are the endangered group. And then goes on to just be women don't understand monasticism because they be shopping.
Yeah.
Women value material things, whereas boys, they want to be monks, and girls, they don't. And I have to explain to my daughters that women are vain, and that you shouldn't care about that because beauty within, whatever.
Yeah.
So these guys are still douchebags, honestly. And now knowing that they have a lineage of fascist, either overtly fascist, Guinonian traditionalist pedophilia.
Yeah.
And fascist apologism, the worst parts of
and also they're illegitimate by their own standards.
They're illegitimate by their own standards.
No. And a cult.
And
A
yeah,
New
they're
Age
connected
cult.
to a guy who has absolutely like to a cult that was started by a dude who is an apostate. They're talking about apostasy. Like, like they have the nerve to talk about that. And like your whole network was like funded and facilitated by a group that was started by a guy who said he was the reincarnation of the Apostle Paul.
Yeah. I mean,
that was like a 200-year-old time traveling, like, transcendent, whatever the fuck he said he was.
I mean, people like Orthodox people thought that these people around Seraphim Rose and Herman were a cult independently of them actually making a deal with an actual New Age cult.
Yes.
Like just in the way they practiced Orthodoxy and how much they revered Seraphim Rose, and then Herman made them, in the eyes of many Orthodox people, a cult already.
Right.
And then they actually like
fucking
fuse in a New Age cult.
Yeah, which is, I don't know, it's mind-blowing to me. I don't know if it is to all of you listeners who like don't follow the weird orthodoxy stuff so much, especially since while preparing for this episode, before I even like got the man stuff, when I was reading the book, and I went kind of down the rabbit hole a little bit more with the resurrected, pun intended, death to the world. Right. So Marlar stops publishing the zine when he stops being a monk, right? In the late 90s, he becomes a layperson. Then in 2006, and I mentioned that in the previous episode that we did about this 2 years ago, the zine gets resurrected by a young couple, guy John Valdez and Marina Chrisman, who like were inspired by Death to the World. They had come out of the like Protestant Christian punk scene, and they were all like part of this like Bible study group that was in this like tattoo parlor. I know this is alien to you, Ray. It's actually alien to me too. Like the whole Christian punk scene is something that I have almost no contact with. Even like, I mean, that's just not something I understand at all, but it is a thing. And it's especially in a lot of parts of the US that I just, whatever. It's not even like, I know how big it is. I know like Cornerstone Festival is like fucking huge, and there's like unblack metal, and there's, all the like, whatever Christian, every genre of subgenre of like metal and punk exists in a Christian form. That's still weird to me. I'm sorry. I'll never understand that. But yeah, so Valdez and these others were part of this like Bible study group, and like they were all punks and metalheads and stuff that was in this tattoo shop. I think that was at the time run by this dude who is now a major figure in this kind of Orthodox convert scene, Turbo Qualls, Father Turbo Qualls. I think he was the one that first became Orthodox out of their study group, and then kind of led them all to convert to Orthodoxy. And since they had come out of that Christian punk scene, they had discovered Death to the World, and they wanted to restart it. And they got Marlar's permission, and they got permission from the brothers at the remaining brothers at St. Herman of Alaska's monastery. And so they get that shit going again in 2006, and they're still publishing to this day. And that becomes a lot more of this like traditional kind of, it becomes, they basically make like the Protestant like music scene, but Orthodox.
Yeah.
And like this guy, John Valdez, is now a priest. And, but yeah, so all of them come out of that, like convert to Orthodoxy together. And Turbo Qualls is, like I said, a kind of big name in that scene. And he has a podcast that I've listened to a bunch. So like going through this, I was listening to him, and he was kind of irritating to me too. But they're all like relatable to the youth, right? Because they come out of like the tattoo scene, and they're all like alternative looking. And Turbo Qualls is like one of the few like bigger, like well-known African-American converts in like the kind of modern Orthodoxy scene, who's a priest and the like.
Loves Nikolai Velimirovich.
Who loves Nikolai Velimirovich. On his podcast, again, this is why I love that they're connected to this cult too, because they're very, very fanatical, and as converts tend to be, and that irritates me just in general. But like, he basically made like apologetic comments for the fucking Romanian Iron Guard.
Yeah.
In like an in like an episode about politics or something. He does it with this other guy who's a former gigolo, crypto bro libertarian. They're all like big like COVID truthers, anti-vaxxers. Like the other guy he does the podcast with moved to Saipan during COVID because of like, you know, lockdown totalitarianism or whatever. And like, yeah, so they're doing this episode about like the dangers of like going too far to the left and too far to the right. Like we all hate like, you know, and when they talk about like gender ideology and stuff, it's like listening to Rob Rondo. They're like, none of us like to see the fucking 500-pound trans freaks, like blue hair trans freaks, like they're destroying our society. But you know, like if you go too far to the right, sometimes they're not like genuine Christians. You know what I mean? They're just trying to do like whatever, like their own thing and or whatever, idol worship, you know, like some stupid fucking religious talk. And then he's like, you know, like the Iron Guard in Romania, like, you know, okay, like, you know, I know like that people they say a lot of like the bad things that they did, like, you know, they went too far with the anti-Semitism. It's like, you mean, did the Holocaust in Romania, like the entire,
it's a bit too far,
like crux of their
a bit
like,
too extreme
movement was based on like the most hardcore anti-Semitism. Like, you know, with like the different fascist groups in Europe, like the Iron Guard is like there with the Nazis in terms of like who their primary enemy was. You know what I mean? Like those Tushas, you know, they cared more about Serbs. Italians didn't even give a fuck about Jews until later. Like, no, that was like their thing. He was like, yeah, they take it a little far, but like nobody talks about like all the good ideas that they had. And I'm like, are you fucking serious? So like, you know, like I've been spending like weeks like listening to these podcasts and like trying to get into that fucking mindset. And then I'm like, I discovered this whole network with the man's thing, and I'm like Googling all these bookstores, and I come up with the one that's whatever. It's like the Desert's Wisdom bookstore in Kansas City, and you go on, and it's like to buy an icon painted by Father Turbo. Click here, and I'm like, motherfucking, that's fucking unbelievable. I don't know. It's hilarious to me. I mean, like these people that are like really just moralizing, talking shit, like being, and they're not even on like the other subgroup of like what they call ortho bros and whatever. We can do an episode on that at some point too, but they're dickheads with dumb politics.
And we now discovered they're the worst possible thing, and that is posers.
Yes, exactly. Okay. They were always posers. I'm sorry. I've said it a million times. Like the only thing that like Nazis do well is black metal, but like the Nazis do black metal are like Satanists and like pagans. Any good metal, I'm sorry, is not Christian. And that is something I will draw a line there. I don't care. You know, we've said a lot of controversial things on this podcast, but this one shouldn't be one. I think I actually ended the last time we did Death to the World. I was like, we should do a music app where we compare like pagan and Satanist music to like whatever comes out of this scene of Death to the World. And I stand by that. And like, okay. I'm sorry. It's still just fucking hilarious to me. I can't get over it. Yeah, I think this might be a good chance to start wrapping up this episode. Even though, again, this was all prompted by this book, I barely talked about it at all. But that's because
you found much more interesting things.
Yeah, I found much more interesting things. And like again, when I was listening to these guys' podcasts, and like Justin Valdez also has a podcast. It's at least Father Turbo and those people, like they know music and pop culture well, and they're interesting to listen to, even though they're more interesting to listen to, even though it's terrible in other ways. But like, man, Father Valdez, dude, like he has I'll give him, he has a good ASMR voice, like, but it's boring. It's all shit. Like it's basically just like him doing a boring sermon on like Father Seraphim's teachings or something. Like he tries to talk about modern art how like it goes wrong. And he's like, and the French Revolution, and then and it's just like it's unlistenable crap. So yeah, I didn't even get a chance to talk about this. But like when I was like listening to that, I was just like, man, like I know they keep on talking about like this is the true faith. Like, you know, we always have to go back, read the lives of the saints. Like, you know, we have to practice, and like that's why they're all Orthodox, is that they think it's like, you know, okay, it's the continuous tradition from, you know, it is the original church continued to this day, and like all this stuff. Like, where the fuck does the Holy Order of Mans play into that? Come on, like, or that, like, I don't know, like you can say all this shit you want about like now, like they can have tattoos and they have like Christian tattoos and shit. And some priests don't like it, but other ones, dude, like they talk about the original church, like go back to fucking Byzantium and tell, I don't know, Theodosius II about like, you know, whatever, tattoos and Christian metal music or whatever. You'd be like blinded and castrated. Fucking like punished in all kinds of gleeful and creative ways for being a pagan or something. You know, these people don't know, like it's all horse shit. And I'm at least happy to know that one of the biggest insults to these people is to be like labeled as some sort of cultist or something, as like not a Christian. And I don't know, to me this is so far gone from like even if, okay, like they've taken over some of these networks and they're in like legitimate churches now, like these coffee shops and bookstores or whatever. Like, wouldn't you still be kind of uncomfortable with where that came from? Wouldn't you still be uncomfortable, like kind of rocking the Death to the World brands, knowing like where it comes from? The Death to the, because if you care about like legitimacy of the Holy Church, where it comes from, like it does not come from like a pedophile Greek dude in New York City fucking ordaining another pedophile Russian guy. Like that's I don't see how that's legitimate in anybody's eyes.
Also, like the brand of Death to the World, but also the brand of Seraphim Rose and his monastery and his pedophile friend and all of that thing is like, you should like abandon that, and also like maybe shut the fuck up.
Exactly. Abandon that and please shut the fuck up. And that's I think a good place to leave it for today. I guess we can probably we'll do another episode on this.
We should,
coming up. And
we should also, there's the book about the man's people.
I know now like I don't even care about these people anymore. Like, fuck this shit. Like I want to go into the Holy Order of Mans. That's way more up my alley and interesting than this. So I'm sure once you get into that, you'll find some even weirder stuff.
For sure.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for listening and subscribing and all that fun stuff.
Thank you.
We'll see you later.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.